From beyond the veil of the Force, infinite paths stretch before us. Choices made and unmade, destinies fulfilled and averted. Today, we explore one such path. What if Princess Leia Organa, not Luke Skywalker, had been chosen for Jedi training? What if the daughter, not the son, carried the lightsaber that would determine the galaxy's fate? This is her story. The blade ignited with a snap hiss that echoed through the detention block. Princess Leia Organa stood perfectly still, her emerald lightsaber casting dancing shadows across the white armor of the stormtroopers who moments ago had held her captive. The Force rippled around her like water responding to a stone, and she didn't need to see their expressions behind those masks to know they were afraid. They should be. She exhaled slowly, feeling the kyber crystal's song harmonizing with her heartbeat, and then she moved. The detention block of the Death Star became a symphony of controlled chaos. Leia's movements were precise, economical, nothing like the aggressive flourishes Obi-Wan had warned her against during their secret training sessions in the hidden chamber beneath Alderaan's royal palace. She deflected blaster bolts with minimal effort, redirecting them into control panels and ceiling fixtures rather than back at her attackers. Even now, even here, she would not kill unless absolutely necessary. The Force wasn't a weapon to her, it was a responsibility. But let's step back. Let's go back to where this divergent path truly began, because the galaxy you think you know shifted on a fulcrum you never saw coming. Polis Massa, 19 years before the Battle of Yavin. The medical facility hummed with the quiet desperation of endings and beginnings colliding. Padme Amidala's final breaths carried the weight of a republic that had just died, and in her arms, 2 infants drew their first breaths in a galaxy that would never know their mother's smile. Master Yoda stood in the sterile corridor, his ancient eyes seeing patterns in the Force that others couldn't perceive. Obi-Wan Kenobi, still reeling from his confrontation with his fallen apprentice, waited for wisdom that felt impossible to find. "Separate them, we must," Yoda said. But then he paused. His gimmer stick tapped against the floor with unusual uncertainty. "But sense something different, I do. The girl. Clarity in her there is. The boy. Clouded, his future remains. Much anger in him, like his father." This was the moment. The pivotal moment. In another timeline, another reality, Luke Skywalker would have been chosen. But Yoda had learned something from the Clone Wars, from watching the Jedi Order collapse under the weight of its own rigid traditions. He had learned that the Force doesn't always speak in the way you expect. It whispers in the spaces between clarity and doubt. "The girl then," Obi-Wan said, though his voice carried the weight of a vow that would shape decades. "I'll take her to Alderaan with Bail Organa, and when she's ready, I'll train her." Enjoying our alternative Star Wars universe? Consider liking and hitting the hype button to show us your support. Don't forget to subscribe for more mind-bending tales from the Star Wars universe. Luke went to Tatooine, hidden in plain sight under twin suns that bleached everything to bone and sand. He would grow up strong, good-hearted, dreaming of stars while knowing nothing of the power sleeping in his blood. But Leia Organa grew up in a palace that concealed a temple, raised by a senator who taught her diplomacy and a disguised Jedi Master who taught her something far older. By the time Leia turned 15, she could sense a lie before the words finished leaving someone's mouth. She could feel the emotional currents in Senate chambers like thermal patterns on a scan display. Bail Organa watched his daughter during diplomatic missions and saw something he couldn't quite name, a presence that made hardened Imperial officers uncomfortable without knowing why. She would tilt her head slightly when someone spoke, as if listening to a frequency no one else could hear, and then she would ask the one question that unraveled their carefully constructed arguments. Ben Lars taught her in the dead of night, in a chamber that Bail's architects had built with Jedi artifacts hidden within its walls. The training was different from the old Order's ways. Obi-Wan had learned from his failures with Anakin. He taught Leia that emotions weren't the enemy, that compassion wasn't weakness, that anger acknowledged and processed was safer than anger denied and buried. He taught her Form 3, Soresu, the most defensive of all lightsaber forms, not because she couldn't master the aggressive styles, but because a Jedi's greatest strength was in knowing when not to strike. "The Force isn't about power, Leia," Obi-Wan told her during one session, his voice carrying the weight of ghosts. "It's about choice. You'll face darkness, in others and in yourself. What matters is what you choose when the easy path leads to destruction." She built her lightsaber when she was 19, using a kyber crystal fragment that Bail had secretly recovered from Jedha before the Empire's mining operations stripped the Holy Moon bare. The crystal sang to her in shades of green and gold, colors of life and hope. When she ignited it for the first time, Obi-Wan wept, though he turned away so she wouldn't see. It wasn't grief, it was recognition. The weapon of a Jedi Knight, elegant and controlled, held by someone who might actually bring balance to a force that had known only violence for too long. Then came the Death Star plans. The mission that would have made her a martyr in another timeline instead made her something far more dangerous to the Empire. When the Tantive 4 was captured above Tatooine, when Darth Vader's shadow fell across the corridor, Leia felt something that made her blood freeze. Not fear, recognition. An echo in the Force. A melody in a minor key that resonated with something deep in her own signature. She had no context for it. No way to understand why this black-armored monster felt like looking into a dark mirror. But she was a Jedi. She centered herself, found her calm, and when they dragged her to the detention level, she began planning her escape. Not with blasters and bravado, but with patience and perception. She sensed the guard rotations, the weak points in their protocols, the moment when a shift change would leave a 3-second gap in surveillance. And when that moment came, she didn't call for help. She freed herself. The interrogation droid never touched her. The moment before Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin arrived, she reached into the Force and suggested, gently but firmly, that the guards outside were needed elsewhere. They marched away like puppets with cut strings. She retrieved her lightsaber from the evidence locker, feeling it call to her through walls and doors. And then she made her way through the Death Star's corridors like smoke through a ventilation system. That's when our story really began. That's when Princess Leia Organa stopped being a senator playing at rebellion and became something the Empire had no contingency plans for. A Jedi who understood power without being corrupted by it, but escape came at a cost. Obi-Wan Kenobi had come for her, just as she'd hoped when she sent that desperate message. He found her in the corridors, and together, they moved toward the hangar bay where a stolen Imperial shuttle waited. Then, Vader appeared, blocking their path, his crimson blade igniting with a sound like tearing reality. Obi-Wan turned to Leia, and in his eyes, she saw goodbye. "Run," he said simply, and then he walked forward to meet his former apprentice. Their blades met with a sound that resonated through the Force itself. Leia wanted to stay, wanted to fight beside her master, but she understood. This was Obi-Wan's choice, his sacrifice, his final lesson. She ran, and behind her, she felt the moment when Obi-Wan Kenobi became something more than flesh, his body dissolving as his consciousness joined the Force. His voice echoed in her mind, "I will always be with you." The hangar bay, the shuttle, hyperspace, and grief so profound it threatened to drown her. The destruction of Alderaan happened as she piloted the stolen shuttle through hyperspace, racing toward Yavin 4. That pain, that wound in the Force, hit her like a physical blow. She felt 2 billion voices cry out and then go silent. And among them, Bail Organa's presence, warm and steady and loving, winked out like a candle in a vacuum. She nearly lost control of the ship, tears streaming down her face. Her connection to the Force suddenly raw and screaming. For a moment, just a moment, she wanted to turn back, wanted to find Tarkin and show him what a Jedi's rage could do. But Obi-Wan's voice echoed in her memory. Anger acknowledged and processed is safer than anger denied and buried. She brought the shuttle out of hyperspace in empty space, knelt there in the cockpit surrounded by stars, and she let herself grieve. She let herself feel the rage, examine it, understand it, and then, slowly, carefully, she let it flow through her and away. The dark side would not claim Leia Organa. Not today. Not ever. When she arrived at Yavin 4 with the Death Star plans, the Rebel Alliance saw something in her that made even Mon Mothma pause. The princess had always been fierce, dedicated, brilliant. But now, there was something else. A presence that steadied everyone around her. When she stood before the assembled pilots and examined the attack plan, her voice carried a certainty that had nothing to do with bravado. She was letting the Force flow through her words, not controlling them, but guiding them. And every pilot in that room felt their doubt transform into determination. Luke Skywalker's path to the rebellion came differently. When Obi-Wan left Tatooine to rescue his Padawan from the Death Star, he stopped briefly at the Lars homestead. He told Luke only that a princess needed help, that the Empire had to be stopped, and that Owen and Beru would be in danger if Luke stayed. The Empire was scouring Tatooine for the droids, and Obi-Wan knew the stormtroopers would eventually reach the farm. Luke left with the old hermit, and by the time Imperial forces arrived at the moisture farm, they found it abandoned. Luke reached Yavin 4 as a pilot recruit, his natural talent in the cockpit earning him a place in Red Squadron, though he never understood why flying felt like breathing, why he could anticipate movements before they happened. "The Force will be with us," Leia said to the assembled pilots, and it wasn't a platitude, it was a promise. The Death Star fell, but not the way it might have in another timeline. Leia stood in the Yavin 4 command center. Her consciousness expanded through the Force, touching each pilot in the trench run. She couldn't fly the mission herself. Her place was here, anchoring them, guiding them. When the critical moment came, when a young moisture farmer named Luke Skywalker lined up his shot in a trench run that seemed impossible, Leia reached through the Force and whispered without words, "Trust yourself." Luke didn't understand the voice he heard, didn't know why his instinct suddenly sharpened to perfect clarity. He just knew with absolute certainty when to fire. The torpedo flew true. The Death Star became an expanding sphere of light against Yavin's green face, and in the command center, Leia smiled through tears, feeling a connection to that pilot she couldn't yet explain. The Empire reeled, and in the celebrations that followed, Leia stood apart, feeling the tremors of something approaching. She had crossed sabers with Vader once during her escape from the Death Star, a brief exchange while Obi-Wan sacrificed himself when Vader tried to cut her off and she'd parried 3 strikes before breaking away. That single encounter, barely 30 seconds of blade contact, had been enough. Brief as it was, she had felt that terrible recognition growing stronger. He was looking for something in her, searching for an answer to a question he hadn't yet asked. Han Solo entered her life the way most scoundrels do, at the worst possible time. The rebellion needed supply runners, smugglers who could navigate Imperial blockades, and Captain Solo came with his Wookiee first mate and a ship that looked held together by prayer and spare parts. Leia sensed his good heart beneath the mercenary swagger, and Han found himself drawn to this princess who carried herself like a warrior monk. Their friendship forged itself in firefights and close calls, in late-night strategy sessions where Han would argue passionately for impossible plans, and Leia would smile that knowing smile that said she'd already seen 3 moves ahead. He never knew she was a Jedi. She kept that secret carefully, but he knew she was special. By the time Hoth's ice wrapped around them, Han Solo would have followed Leia Organa into any hell, though he never admitted out loud. The answer came on Bespin 3 years later, after Hoth's frozen hell and Dagobah's swamp wisdom. Yoda had been surprised to meet her, this hidden Padawan of Obi-Wan's, and more surprised still to find her so advanced. But he pushed her harder than Obi-Wan ever had, forcing her to confront the shadows in her own heart. The anger over Alderaan, the fear of becoming like Vader, the terrible responsibility of being one of the last Jedi in a galaxy that needed her to be perfect. "No such thing as perfect there is," Yoda told her. "Only balanced, only choosing, moment by moment, to serve the light even when darkness calls." And then, Cloud City, the trap she walked into with eyes wide open because she had sensed Han Solo's danger, because she couldn't abandon her friends, because that was who Leia Organa was. When Vader finally cornered her on that gantry, when the carbon freezing chamber steamed behind them and the city's sunset painted everything in shades of blood orange, he spoke the words that would shatter one universe and create another.
"I am your father."
She didn't scream. She didn't deny it. The Force doesn't lie. And through the Force, she felt the truth of it like a supernova in her soul. This monster, this mechanical horror who had cut down Obi-Wan, who served the Emperor, who had helped destroy everything she loved. This was Anakin Skywalker, her father, the man her mother had loved enough to die for. "I know," she said quietly, her lightsaber steady in her hand. "I've always known, I think, in the way the Force knows things before the mind catches up." They fought, but it was different from any duel in the archives. Leia didn't try to kill him. She defended, redirected, created distance, and all the while, she let her presence in the Force speak to something buried deep within Vader's armor. She showed him without words, without anger, what he had been and what he might still become. And when she finally disengaged and escaped, she felt Vader standing alone on that gantry, staring at his gloved hand as if seeing it for the first time. The truth about Luke came to her on Dagobah, where Yoda's ancient eyes saw what she'd been blind to. "Your brother, he is," Yoda said, pointing his gimmer stick toward the stars where Luke flew his X-Wing in defense of the fleet. The Force rippled with recognition, and suddenly, everything made sense. The connection she'd felt to that pilot at Yavin, the way they moved in sync during battles without communication. They were two halves of the same whole, separated at birth, each carrying Skywalker blood and Skywalker destiny. When she returned to the fleet, she told Luke everything, and they stood together in the observation deck, staring at stars that suddenly seemed less lonely. "I always wanted a sister," Luke said with that farm boy grin, and Leia found herself laughing through tears, feeling a piece of her soul click into place. The final confrontation came aboard the second Death Star, with Endor's green moon spinning below, and the Empire's remnants gathering for one last stand. Leia insisted on being taken to the Emperor, on facing what needed to be faced, and Luke, her brother, now revealed and reunited, wanted to join her, but she refused him gently. This burden was hers. This choice belonged to the Jedi, and she was the Jedi the Force had made her to be. In the throne room, Palpatine's yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation. He had prepared for a warrior, for rage and passion and the dark side's seduction. What he got was Leia Organa, whose presence felt like standing in the eye of a storm, perfectly calm while chaos swirled around her. "Strike down your father," the Emperor commanded, lightning crackling at his fingertips. "Take your place at my side." She could have. The dark side whispered how easy it would be, how justified. Vader had enabled Alderaan's destruction, had tortured her friends, had served this twisted creature for decades. But Leia had spent years learning one truth that Palpatine could never understand. Strength isn't about destruction. It's about creation. It's about choosing mercy when vengeance would be easier. She deactivated her lightsaber, let it drop to her side, and she looked at Vader, really looked at him, seeing past the mask to the broken man inside. "You cannot make me hate what I still love," she said. "Father," that word, father, spoken with such calm acceptance, such impossible compassion, did what no amount of combat ever could. Something shifted in the Force, tectonic and irreversible. Anakin Skywalker, who had fallen because he couldn't save the woman he loved, who had remained fallen because he believed he was beyond saving, heard his daughter's forgiveness and finally understood what he had been looking for all along. Not power, not control, just love without condition. Just the chance to be more than his worst moment. He turned, grabbed Palpatine, and as the Emperor's lightning consumed them both, Leia felt her father's presence transform in the Force, darkness burning away to reveal a light she recognized from 1,000 dreams. In his final moments, Anakin Skywalker returned, and he smiled behind the mask as he saved the daughter who had saved him first. The galaxy was reborn in the years that followed. The New Republic rose, and with it, a Jedi Order that learned from the old ways without being bound by them. Leia became both Chancellor and Master, showing a generation that the Force served those who served others. Luke joined her, not as a Jedi, but as a hero of the rebellion. And together, the Skywalker twins represented something new. Balance between action and wisdom, between strength and compassion, between the light and the acknowledgement that darkness exists and must be understood, not merely fought. On the day the first new Jedi Temple was dedicated on Naboo, Leia stood before her students and ignited her lightsaber one more time. Its green blade hummed with purpose, and in that hum, you could hear the echoes of everyone who had made this moment possible. Padme's compassion, Bael's integrity, Obi-Wan's patience, Yoda's wisdom, and Anakin's redemption. Proof that no one is beyond hope, that the Force believes in second chances even when we've stopped believing in ourselves. The galaxy needed hope, she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. And the Force found it, not in a warrior, but in a daughter who refused to hate, her lightsaber extinguished. the temple bells rang, and somewhere in the Force, 4 spirits watched and smiled, knowing that balance at last had been achieved. If you enjoyed this journey into an alternative Star Wars universe, where destiny takes unexpected turns and balance means something entirely different, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We explore the infinite possibilities hidden within the galaxy far, far away, asking the questions that reshape everything you thought you knew. The Force has many paths. Come discover them with us.